The ship Peregrine did not so much cut through the void as it drifted, a long, slender craft whose polished hull reflected distant suns like a wind chime catching light. Her engines were quiet, built for efficiency rather than speed, and inside, the corridors glowed with soft bioluminescent strips that hummed faintly, almost like the sigh of a seashell held to one's ear. Nia sat in the observation lounge, a steaming cup in her hands. The beverage was called tea, but the dried petals and roots had been gathered on a world whose language had no equivalent word. It tasted faintly of citrus and cedar. She sipped slowly, watching the streak of a nebula across the panoramic window. There was no rush. There never was aboard the Peregrine. Exploration, Captain Solen always said, was about patience. The lounge door hissed open, and a familiar shuffle entered. Jarrow, the ship's botanist, carried a tray stacked with samples sealed in transparent capsules. His hair was mussed, as though he'd forgotten to brush it in his excitement, and flecks of pale soil clung stubbornly to his sleeves. "You're up early," Nia said, setting her cup down. "Or late, depends how you measure time when the planet below has days twice the length of ours." He set the tray down carefully, as if the samples might scold him if he jostled them too much. "You should have come with me." The valley glowed at dusk, the mosses all lighting up in patterns that looked like constellations underfoot. I nearly fell into a ravine staring at them. "That sounds like you," Nia teased, her lips curling into a smile. "Trip over stars whether they're in the sky or on the ground." Jarrow grinned, unabashed. "Worth it, though. I think one of these specimens can sustain oxygenation in microenvironments. Imagine little gardens blooming even in sealed domes." Before Nia could respond, the intercom chimed. The captain's voice, low and measured, filled the lounge. "Crew, gather in the charting room. We have a new course." The charting room was the beating heart of the Peregrine. Unlike the sterile control decks of many ships, Solen had allowed her navigator to design it as a place of calm. The walls were lined with woven tapestries depicting stylized stars, and the great central table projected holograms of space in swirling, dreamlike threads. Captain Solen stood at the head of the table, her posture precise yet unhurried. Her silver-streaked hair was tied back, and her eyes seemed to catch starlight even in shadow. Around the table gathered the rest of the crew, Nia, Jarrow, the quiet engineer Alira with grease stains on her cheeks, and Kesh, the ship's medic, who leaned back with arms crossed, radiating curiosity more than skepticism. Solen tapped the projection, and a new starfield blossomed before them. One point pulsed amber, marked with a soft halo. "This," Solen began, "is Nadia 7. An uncharted planet flagged only in passing by an automated probe a decade ago. The probe's records suggest anomalies in atmospheric readings, breathable zones within otherwise hostile layers. No further missions were sent. Which means," Kesh said slowly, "we might be the first crewed vessel to touch down there." "Precisely. And that," Solen's smile was subtle, almost private, "is our purpose. We go gently where others pass by." Nia leaned forward, curiosity alight. "What sort of anomalies?" "Localized pockets of oxygen, as though bubbles suspended in a denser, toxic atmosphere. If they're stable, they could host ecosystems, perhaps even entire communities of life, separated by invisible walls of air." Jarrow's eyes shone, like islands in the sky. Alira frowned thoughtfully, rubbing at the grease on her hand. "Navigating descent will be tricky if the atmosphere's layered. Could shear a hull if we're careless." Solen inclined her head. "Which is why we will not be careless. Our ship was built for delicacy, and our mission is not conquest, but listening." The words settled over the crew like a blessing. "Set course?" Nia asked, already feeling the familiar stirring of excitement, not adrenaline, not urgency, but the warm tide of anticipation, like preparing a canvas before painting. "Set course," Solen confirmed. "Nadia 7 awaits." Later, when the crew had dispersed, Nia lingered by the projection. She traced the glowing threads, imagining the world waiting ahead. She had joined the Peregrine because she wanted to see beauty unhurried. Other expeditions she'd studied were always rushing, to claim, to prove, to win. But here, in this small vessel with its tapestries and its quiet halls, discovery was not a trophy. It was a story. And Nia, she thought, had always loved stories. She sipped the last of her tea and whispered toward the stars, as if they could hear, "Tell me yours." 3 days later, Nadia 7 filled the observation windows, a sphere marbled in deep ochres and storm-dark greys. Bands of dense atmosphere swirled in churning belts, but here and there shimmered softer regions, faint as dew, the oxygen pockets. The ship's descent was measured, careful as a hand brushing against silk. Alira sat at the helm, her fingers dancing across the console, eyes narrowed in concentration. The hull shuddered once, twice, then steadied. "Outer layers dense," Alira muttered, "like pushing through syrup." "Readings stable," Nia supplied from her station. "Pocket ahead, 30 clicks wide." Composition, 71% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. Breathable. Jarrow leaned forward, pressing against his restraints like a child peering out a window. "Do you see that glow? Lower left quadrant, it's green. No, emerald." The pocket came into view, a vast spherical bubble suspended in the denser gases, lit from within by a shimmering forest canopy. Leaves broad as sails reflected a light source hidden somewhere within the mists. The bubble itself refracted their ship's running lights, casting rainbows across the view. Kesh let out a low whistle. "Islands in the sky indeed." Solen's voice was steady, but her gaze betrayed wonder. "Prepare landing sequence. Find a clearing." The peregrine descended into the bubble with the gentleness of a falling petal. As the outer gases parted, the ship slid into the breathable zone, and suddenly the sensors quieted, readings smoothing into familiar patterns. A lush world lay below, canopy stretching in undisturbed layers, vines thick as pillars. Nia's heart thudded. She had seen worlds before, rocky plains, silent ice, empty oceans, but this was different. This was alive in a way that seemed to hum in the bones. When the landing struts touched soil, there was a hush across the cabin. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Jarrow whispered, reverent, "We are standing in a bubble of life." The crew disembarked in pairs. The air was thick but breathable, carrying scents that reminded Nia of wet stone, ripe fruit, and something faintly metallic. The ground was springy underfoot, carpeted in moss that pulsed faintly as if with a heartbeat. Nia crouched, brushing her fingers over it. At her touch, the moss brightened, glowing in soft ripples that spread outward like rings on water. She gasped, laughter bubbling unbidden. "Responsive flora," Jarrow said, already kneeling with his instruments. "They sense touch. Incredible." Alira looked upward, eyes scanning the canopy. "If the ecosystem evolved in isolation, it may be fragile. Watch your steps." "Noted," Kesh replied, though even he seemed softened by the beauty around them. They walked slowly, reverently, recording, sketching, sampling. Every few steps brought some new marvel. Vines that whispered when brushed, fruit that glimmered like glass, insects with wings patterned like galaxies. At one point, Nia paused by a pool of still water. Within its surface swam creatures shaped like ribbons of light, weaving patterns that looked almost purposeful. She knelt, mesmerized, until Solen's shadow fell beside her. "Careful, Nia," the captain said gently. "Not all beauty is meant to be touched." Nia nodded, though her gaze lingered. She felt as though the pool had shown her something, not a reflection, but a story waiting to be heard. And that, she thought, was why they were here. That night, camped beside the peregrine under a sky that was not sky, but bubble wall refracting alien storms beyond, the crew shared a meal. They spoke in low voices, trading impressions like children sharing secrets. "Do you think the pockets are natural?" Kesh asked between bites. "Or crafted by something, someone?" Jarrow shrugged. "The symmetry suggests design, but life itself is a designer, isn't it? Trial and error over eons." Alira poked at the fire. "If someone made these, I'd like to meet them." Solen, gazing upward, said only, "Perhaps we will." The crew fell quiet, each holding that thought like a lantern. The air around them shimmered faintly, as though the bubble itself was listening. And Nia, lying back on the moss, thought she could almost hear it breathing. Morning came slowly in the bubble, though it was not sunlight that woke the crew, but the gradual shifting of hues across the canopy. Leaves caught some unseen radiance and turned from emerald to gold, then deepened into a burnished copper. It was as though the forest itself painted dawn in broad strokes across the sky. Nia stretched outside the ship, her boots sinking slightly into the spongy moss. She inhaled the damp air, listening. There was sound now, faint, melodic vibrations that seemed to drift from the upper branches. Birds, she wondered aloud. Jarrow, already wide-eyed with his datapad, shook his head. Not quite. Frequencies are broader, resonant, could be the flora itself, singing. Alira emerged with a coil of tools strapped to her hip. Plants don't sing, perhaps not where you're from, Jarrow replied with a grin. But here, he lifted a small sensor, and the readings flickered across the screen. It's measurable, rhythms, patterns, the trees are communicating. Nia tilted her head, listening again. The sound was unlike any bird call, more like a chorus of crystal glasses being played, a resonance that trembled along the bones rather than the ears. Solène approached then, her stride as steady as ever. We'll follow the sound, stay in pairs, document carefully. Remember, we are guests. The crew moved through the undergrowth, careful to disturb as little as possible. The moss glowed faintly beneath each step, rippling out in circles. Vines swayed even where no wind touched them, as though acknowledging the travelers. As they entered a clearing, the song grew louder. High above, broad leaves vibrated visibly, trembling in unison. From their undersides dangled translucent pods, and inside each pod glimmered pale shapes, larvae, perhaps, or seeds. Jarrow's voice dropped to a whisper. It's a cradle. The song keeps time, a lullaby. Kesh crouched, scanning the air. The frequency stabilizes the atmosphere in this pocket. If it falters, maybe the bubble collapses. Alira frowned. So the entire ecosystem relies on this chorus to survive. Exactly. Jarrow's eyes shone. A forest that sings itself into being. Nia felt goosebumps rise on her arms. She pressed a hand to her chest, the vibrations settling through her heart like a second pulse. She thought of her childhood stories, of worlds that spoke if only you listened closely enough. And here it was, real. Later, as the crew recorded samples and observations, Nia wandered a short distance toward a rise in the terrain. From there, she could see the edge of the bubble. Beyond it churned the dense outer atmosphere, an impenetrable storm just beyond reach. The refracted light made the barrier shimmer like glass. And then, movement. Something vast and slow drifted along the outer edge. At first, she thought it was another cloud, but then it turned, revealing an immense shape, translucent like a jellyfish, its tendrils trailing. It passed near the bubble wall, and the singing canopy shifted pitch in response. Nia's breath caught. "You're not alone, are you?" she whispered. The creature lingered, as though listening, then drifted away into the storms. When she returned to the others, her heart was racing with wonder. She wanted to tell them what she had seen, but part of her held back, savoring the secret a little longer. Some discoveries, she thought, wanted to be cherished before they were shared. That night, as they gathered again by the ship, the canopy sang its lullaby. The crew ate quietly, lost in their own thoughts. The moss glowed beneath them, pulsing like a heartbeat. Nia lay back, eyes on the shimmering dome above, and let the song carry her into dreams. And in those dreams, she heard a voice that was not her own, whispering, "Listen deeper." The morning was damp, heavy with mist that clung to the moss like lace. The canopy's song had shifted overnight. Instead of a lullaby's slow rhythm, the vibrations now throbbed with a steady cadence, almost like a drumbeat. Nia noticed it immediately upon stepping outside, and Jarrow confirmed her impression with wide-eyed enthusiasm. "They've changed key," he said, holding his scanner high. "It's not just background resonance. This is adaptive, responsive." Alira adjusted her pack, frowning. "Responsive to what?" The captain's voice was calm, measured. "That's what we'll learn." Their exploration today carried them deeper into the forest, where the trunks thickened into pillars broader than the peregrine herself. Each step seemed to invite new marvels, beetles whose shells refracted like prisms, roots that hummed when stepped upon, streams that carried motes of light like drifting embers. Eventually, they reached a rise where one tree dominated the landscape. It towered higher than the others, its bark marked with intricate grooves that glowed faintly like veins of starlight. The base was hollowed, an opening wide enough for 3 people to walk abreast. Natural formation? Kesh asked, scanning. His readings flickered uncertainly. Too symmetrical, Alira murmured. Too deliberate. Nia stepped closer, her breath caught in her throat. She felt the air shift near the entrance, cooler, tinged with a faint metallic tang. Something about the grooves in the bark drew her, patterns that seemed almost like script. Solen placed a hand on the trunk, reverent. If the forest sings, perhaps this is its instrument. Inside, the hollow opened into a vast chamber. The walls were lined with organic ridges that resonated faintly with the outside song. When Jarrow tapped one with his knuckle, the tone echoed, harmonizing with the canopy above. "This is a resonator," he breathed. "A natural cathedral." Nia tilted her head. "Or a library." The others looked at her. She gestured toward the grooves. "Look, the markings aren't random. They repeat. Could be a record." The forest keeping memory in song. Kesh crouched, tracing a pattern with his finger. If so, then someone or something carved this. The thought lingered heavily in the air. A forest that sang itself alive was wonder enough, but a forest that remembered, that was history. As they explored deeper into the hollow, a sudden shift in sound made them pause. The song of the canopy faltered, dipping into a lower register. The walls trembled faintly. Alira's hand flew to her tools. "That's not good. If the resonance destabilizes..." But before she could finish, a new sound filled the chamber, a low, thrumming call from beyond the bubble's edge. It reverberated through the hollow tree, answering the canopy's song. Nia's heart raced. She recognized it, the sound of the immense jellyfish-like being she had seen drifting outside. The canopy was not just sustaining itself, it was conversing. The crew exchanged glances, unspoken awe passing between them. Solen's voice was steady, though her eyes gleamed. "We are not alone here, and we are not the first to listen." That night, the crew camped near the hollow tree. None of them spoke much. Words felt small against what they had witnessed. The air shimmered with resonance, carrying both the forest's song and the distant reply of something vast in the storms. Nia lay awake long after the others slept, staring at the grooves in her datapad's sketches. She felt the voice from her dreams returning, listened deeper. And for the first time, she wondered if the planet itself was trying to teach them something, not just to observe, but to join the song. The next morning, the canopy's resonance began before the crew had even stirred. It rolled through the bubble in long, measured tones, deeper than the lullabies of before. Nia woke with the vibration thrumming in her chest. She sat up, blinking, as the sound shifted, rising and falling in deliberate intervals. "It's language," she murmured. Jarrow, already fiddling with his instruments, looked up sharply. "You hear it too?" The others gathered quickly, their expressions mirroring her awe. The canopy sang, but this time the tones were mirrored, answered from beyond the bubble wall. The massive jellyfish-shaped being Nia had glimpsed yesterday drifted closer, its translucent body pulsing with faint bioluminescence. Each glow seemed timed to the rhythm of the song. Kesh exhaled slowly. "It's a dialogue, call and response." Alira frowned, scanning the ship's sensors. "They're exchanging pressure waves, sound, light, data." "Stories," Nia whispered. "The forest sings, and the sky listens." The crew moved quickly to the hollow tree, their instruments struggling to capture the layered complexity of the resonance. Inside, the walls vibrated with harmonics that painted the chamber in trembling light. Patterns shifted across the bark grooves like constellations moving through time. Jarrow's datapad flickered with translations, incomplete, tentative. "This is beyond our lexicon, but look, repetition, structure. It's as if the tree itself is a recording device tuned to archive the conversations." Nia ran her hand across the grooves. She felt warmth there, faint but undeniable. It's not just memory, it's participation. The tree is part of the dialogue. The captain's voice was steady, reverent. "And so are we, if we choose to listen well enough." Hours passed as they recorded, listening to the exchange between canopy and sky creature. At first, it seemed abstract, tonal, but then something changed. The rhythm slowed, spacing widened, and a new motif emerged, a rising, falling pattern that repeated thrice before pausing. The creature outside pulsed its lights in identical rhythm. The hollow tree responded with a low, resonant chord that lingered like a question. Nia's pulse quickened. That's directed. It's not just them to each other, they're including us. The realization rippled through the crew like electricity. For the first time, it felt as though the planet, its forest, its sky dwellers, was aware of them. Not merely tolerating their presence, but inviting them into the song. Night came, though the bubble did not darken fully. Instead, the canopy shimmered in phosphorescent hues, and the great being outside lingered close, a guardian at the threshold. The song continued, gentle now, almost conversational. Around the campfire, the crew spoke softly. "Do we answer?" Kesh asked, his voice low. "If this is language, shouldn't we try?" Alira hesitated. "And risk misunderstanding? We don't know their rules." Solen stirred the embers with a measured hand. "Communication is always risk, silence too, but sometimes listening is an answer." Her words settled over them like a balm, yet Nia could not shake the feeling that the voice in her dreams had been urging more. Listen deeper. Wasn't that also a call to respond? She looked toward the hollow tree, its grooves glowing faintly in the firelight, and thought she saw a pattern there, waiting, expectant. For the first time, she wondered if their presence here was not chance at all, but part of a story already unfolding. Dawn came softly, though the crew had slept little. The canopy and the sky creature had traded harmonies deep into the night, leaving the air humming like a plucked string. When Nia stepped outside the ship, she felt the resonance echo in her ribs, as though she herself had become part of the chorus. Jarrow approached with red-rimmed eyes, datapad clutched like a talisman. I think we can reply." Kesh raised an eyebrow. "You mean play back recordings?" "No." Jarrow's voice trembled between exhaustion and exhilaration. "Not mimicry, participation. The harmonics follow ratios, thirds, fifths, octaves, universal mathematics. If we project sound within those intervals, they'll recognize it as intention." Alira crossed her arms. "And if we strike the wrong chord? What if we shatter the bubble instead of adding to the song?" "Then we'll learn," Solen said quietly. She stood at the edge of the moss, her posture calm, her gaze lifted toward the glowing canopy. "But to come all this way and remain silent is its own failure. We were not made only to listen. We were made to answer." They assembled in the hollow tree, instruments placed carefully along the resonant ridges. Jarrow calibrated a set of portable emitters, their lights flickering nervously. Nia sat cross-legged near one groove, her hand pressed flat against it. She could feel the vibration running beneath her skin, as though the forest was waiting. "What do we play?" Kesh asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Nia closed her eyes. In her dreams, the voice had always repeated the same phrase, "Listen deeper." She thought of that now, and the answer came without words. "Something simple," she said. "A greeting." Jarrow nodded. He adjusted the emitters, then looked to Solen. The captain gave a single, solemn nod. The first tone rose soft, tentative, a pure note that wavered before settling. The chamber amplified it, sending it outward into the canopy. For a breathless moment, nothing. Then the forest replied. A shimmer of tones cascaded from the leaves above, gentle yet unmistakably responsive. Beyond the bubble wall, the massive sky creature pulsed with pale light, echoing the rhythm. Nia's chest tightened. They had answered, and they had been heard. Encouraged, the crew layered another interval, a chord of thirds, resonant and bright. The hollow tree deepened the sound, blending it with its own timbre until it seemed less like humans making noise and more like a continuation of the planet's song. And then, for the first time, the dialogue shifted. The canopy's tones restructured, weaving in the crew's contribution. The creature outside brightened, trailing arcs of light through the storm. It was not call and response now, but chorus. "They've included us," Jarrow whispered. "We are part of it." Nia pressed her hand harder to the groove, her heart aching with wonder. She felt the vibrations resolve into something more, not language in the way she knew it, but meaning nonetheless. An opening, an invitation. Her eyes met Solen's. The captain's calm face could not hide the flicker of awe in her gaze. "Remember this moment," Solen said softly. "We are no longer strangers." That night, the crew sat in silence outside the ship, listening to the forest sing with their own voices threaded within. It was the gentlest triumph Nia had ever known, not a victory wrested, but a harmony shared. As she drifted into sleep on the glowing moss, she heard the whisper in her dreams again, clearer than ever before. "Now you are listening. Soon you must understand." The following day, the resonance was different again. It was not just tones echoing through the canopy or lights pulsing in the storm beyond. It was patterns, deliberate and repeating. When Nia listened closely, she swore she could almost trace shapes in the vibrations, spirals, lattices, arcs. In the hollow tree, the grooves glowed faintly, shifting like constellations being redrawn. Jarrow's datapad struggled to keep up, converting the harmonics into crude visual graphs that danced across the screen. "It's not random," Jarrow muttered, his voice taut with focus. "These are sequences. Structured like narratives, the forest is showing us something." Alira leaned against the chamber wall, arms crossed. "Stories in sound, do we know the language?" "Not yet," Nia whispered. She pressed her palm against one glowing groove. "But we can feel it." The first story unfolded in rhythm, a rising triad, sustained, followed by a sudden collapse into silence. Then the forest echoed with a low, mournful tone that lasted almost a minute. "It's telling of loss," Kesh said, surprising them with the certainty in his voice. He had been quiet until now, a healer observing more than interpreting. "The way families recount their dead in song, this is remembrance." The grooves brightened in confirmation, as if the forest had heard and agreed. The tones shifted, weaving a new pattern, a series of chords building slowly upward, then branching into variations. "Growth," Nia said, her throat tight. "Emergence, the birth of something." Outside the bubble, the great sky creature pulsed in time, each glow like a heartbeat. It too was part of the story. Hours passed in hushed wonder. The crew sat in the resonant chamber, listening to histories not in words, but in tones, harmonies, and light. The forest and the sky being sang of cycles, collapse and rebirth, storm and shelter, silence and song. Each refrain carried weight, not as data but as memory shared. Jarrow looked stricken, his hands trembling. "We are inside a living archive." A library woven not from books, but from ecosystems themselves. The forest sings, the creatures reply, and together they carry history forward. Solen's eyes gleamed as she gazed up at the chamber's trembling ceiling. "This is not just survival, it is culture." As dusk shimmered through the bubble, Nia lingered at the hollow tree's entrance. The songs still echoed faintly in her bones, filling her with a sense of both wonder and gravity. She thought again of the voice in her dreams. "Now you are listening. Soon you must understand." For the first time, she wondered if the songs were not only history, but warning, memory passed on not simply to preserve, but to prepare. She turned back to the others, her voice soft but steady. "They're teaching us. The question is, for what?" By morning, the harmony of the canopy had shifted again. Where before the tones had risen and fallen in long, patient cadences, now they trembled with dissonance. The song was still beautiful, but beauty edged with unease, like a river that runs too fast after rain. Nia and Jarrow studied the readings inside the hollow tree. The grooves glowed erratically, flickering as though struggling to hold form. "It's warning us," Nia said, certain. "The patterns last night were cycles, collapse, rebirth. This is collapse again." Alira tapped her console, scanning the bubble's periphery, her brow furrowed. "The outer layers of atmosphere are destabilizing, pockets shifting. The pressure gradients are moving like tides." Kesh straightened from where he had been listening with closed eyes. "Then the stories aren't just history, they're forecasts." They gathered outside, gazing at the shimmering wall of the bubble. Beyond it, storms writhed like dark muscles, surging closer. The great sky creature hovered at the boundary, its tendrils lashing gently against the currents. Its pulses of light had quickened, no longer languid but urgent. Jarrow looked up in awe. It's bracing the pocket, holding it open. And it can't forever, Alira said grimly. If the layers collapse, the bubble goes, everything in it goes with it. Nia's throat tightened. She looked at the glowing moss beneath their boots, the canopy whispering overhead, the luminous pools where ribbon creatures swam. A whole ecosystem, fragile as a breath, depending on harmony to survive. Solen's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of command. Then the forest is not just teaching us about memory, it's asking us to help. Back in the hollow tree, the crew debated. Jarrow argued they could amplify the resonance, strengthening the canopy's stabilizing song with their instruments. Alira warned that intervention could worsen the imbalance. Kesh reminded them of the healer's principle. Sometimes survival meant lending strength, not withholding it. Nia sat apart, listening to the groove's hum. She remembered the dream voice. Now you are listening. Soon, you must understand. Her fingers traced the patterns glowing faintly across the bark. The harmonics tugged at her chest, pulling her toward a realization she couldn't quite name. What if, she said slowly, the forest isn't asking for us to fix it, but to join in, to become part of the stabilizing rhythm, even if just for a little while? Jarrow's eyes lit with fierce hope. A chorus. Yes, if we add resonance, carefully tuned, we might relieve the strain. Alira hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. It's dangerous, but so is silence. Solen rested her hand on the glowing wall of the hollow. Then we will answer again, together. That night, the crew set up their emitters throughout the forest's heart. Jarrow calibrated frequencies, while Alira tuned their equipment to the canopy's trembling notes. Nia stood beneath the towering branches, eyes closed, breathing in time with the rhythm. When the first chords rose, they were shaky, human, and imperfect, but the forest accepted them. The canopy shifted, adjusting pitch to blend. The sky creature beyond flared with light, its vast form steadying against the storm. For a moment, the dissonance eased. The bubble brightened, stabilizing. Nia opened her eyes and whispered into the night, "We hear you." The forest replied in harmonies so deep she felt them in her bones. And in her dreams that night, the voice returned once more, closer now, urgent and tender all at once. "To help us, you must first remember." Nia woke before the others. The canopy's tones lingered in her bones, softer now but threaded with a faint, plaintive undertone. She slipped away quietly and walked toward the hollow tree, guided more by intuition than intention. Inside, the grooves glowed dimly, as though conserving strength. Nia sat cross-legged on the mossy floor and placed both hands against the wall. The vibration thrummed beneath her skin. She closed her eyes, and then she remembered. Not her own memories, but images not her own. Storms raging, bubbles collapsing, forests suffocating into silence. Then rebirth, seedlings pushing through soil, sky creatures weaving currents to shelter them. Again and again, cycles of loss and return. She gasped, tears stinging her eyes. The songs were not simply history or prophecy. They were memory offered freely, asking her to hold it. When she opened her eyes, the grooves pulsed brighter, as though recognizing her understanding. Later, back at camp, Nia told the others what she had seen. Her voice trembled but did not falter. "It's not about them teaching us facts. It's about them sharing memory, so we don't just witness, we remember alongside them. We become part of the continuity." Kesh's gaze softened, like oral traditions. Stories carried by people so they never die. "Yes," Nia said, her heart quickening. "Except here, the planet itself chooses who carries them. It's not just about hearing, it's about keeping." Jarrow's face lit with reverence. "A library that remembers through us." Alira leaned forward, thoughtful. "But why us? Why now?" Nia hesitated. She thought again of the voice in her dreams. "To help us, you must first remember," she swallowed. "Because the cycles are breaking. The storms are stronger this time. The sky creatures are struggling. They can't hold the balance alone anymore. They need us to carry the memory forward, maybe beyond this place." That evening, the canopy sang a gentler melody, almost like approval. The great sky being drifted close to the bubble wall, luminous tendrils shimmering like a blessing. The crew sat together in silence, each absorbing the weight of what Nia had shared. Solen finally spoke, her voice steady, calm. We came to explore, to listen. Perhaps we were also meant to bear witness, to become stewards of their song. Nia felt warmth spread through her chest, awe, responsibility, and something like love. The memory was inside her now, vast and aching. She did not know how she could carry it all, but she knew she must. For in the cycles she had glimpsed, there was always a choice, silence or remembrance. And Nia, with the song of the forest in her bones, chose remembrance. The next day the storms pressed closer. The bubble shuddered as if tested by a great hand. Lightning crawled across the outer atmosphere, illuminating the vast form of the sky creature as it strained against the currents. Its light flickered in ragged pulses, no longer steady but urgent. Alira studied her instruments with a grim expression. The stability is failing faster than projected. Hours, maybe less, before this pocket collapses. Jarrow's hands shook as he adjusted resonance amplifiers. We can reinforce again like before. If we strengthen the harmonics, it will buy us time, Alira cut in, but not solve the core problem. The balance here is breaking down. Whatever cycle sustained this place is slipping beyond repair. Nia stood silent, the forest's memory heavy in her chest. She could feel it, the canopies trembling, the sky creature's weary strength, the sorrow threading through every note. They were not only singing for survival, they were asking to be remembered. The crew gathered in the hollow tree. Its grooves flickered faintly as though exhausted. Solen looked at each of them in turn. We face a choice. We can leave, carrying what we've learned, or we can stay and give all we can to hold this place a little longer. Kesh's brow furrowed. If we stay, we risk being lost with it. And if we go, Nia whispered, we abandon them to vanish without witness. Her voice trembled, but then steadied. The forest chose us to carry memory. That doesn't end here. Even if this bubble collapses, what they've given us can endure if we take it beyond. Jarrow's eyes glistened. A living record traveling the stars. Solen nodded slowly. Then we are not here to save them. We are here to ensure they are not forgotten. As if in response, the canopy swelled with a sudden surge of harmony. Notes cascaded through the chamber like falling stars. Outside, the great sky creature pulsed once, bright and defiant, before fading again to a dim glow. Nia placed her hand against the glowing grooves. The vibration coursed through her, almost unbearable in its intensity. It was grief and gratitude intertwined. She felt it settle into her bones, anchoring itself there. "We'll carry you," she whispered, her throat raw. "Wherever we go, we'll carry you." The forest's reply was soft, like the closing bars of a long song, yet beneath it lay a deeper undertone, a question, unresolved, waiting for their answer. That night, as the storms roared closer, the crew prepared their ship. Alira charted escape vectors. Jarrow encoded resonance data. Kesh tended to the faintly glowing samples of moss and spores that had attached themselves to their gear. Each action was small, but each carried the weight of remembrance. Nia stood at the viewport, watching the sky creature fight the storm. She felt the echo of the forest within her, an unbroken chain of memory now linked to her own. She did not know if the bubble would survive the night, but she knew the song would not end here. On the final morning, the bubble quivered like glass under strain. The air felt thinner, every breath sharp and precious. Yet the canopy still sang, softer now, almost a lullaby. It was not the defiance of survival, but the tenderness of farewell. The crew stood at the base of the hollow tree, packs slung over their shoulders. Alira had prepared the wayfarer for launch. Jarrow clutched data cores heavy with resonance maps. Kesh carried carefully sealed containers of spores and moss that glowed faintly, humming with life. Nia lingered, palms pressed to the grooves one last time. The patterns surged beneath her touch, filling her with warmth so deep it stole her breath. She closed her eyes and let it wash through her. Visions came, the canopy swaying in calmer ages, the sky creatures weaving bubbles like cradles, the laughter of countless lifetimes carried in tone and light. Then something new, a spark, a thread winding outward beyond the bubble toward the stars. When she opened her eyes, the grooves dimmed, their glow fading like embers, but she understood. "They've given us a seed," she whispered. "Not just memory, possibility." Outside, the great sky creature approached the bubble wall, closer than ever before. Its luminous tendrils brushed the barrier, sending ripples of light across the dome. For a heartbeat, the wall thinned, and Nia swore she felt its presence touch her mind. "Carry us," the voice resonated, not words but a knowing. "Carry us where we cannot go." Tears blurred her vision. "We will," she promised aloud. "We'll carry you." The creature pulsed once, brilliant, before withdrawing into the storm. The bubble trembled violently, but the crew no longer hesitated. They turned together, heading toward the shuttle bay. As the wayfarer lifted from the mossy ground, the forest rose in chorus. Every tree, every luminous pool, every trembling vine seemed to join the song. It was no longer warning, no longer grief. It was blessing. Nia stood at the viewport, one hand pressed to the glass. She felt the melody flow through her, into her, anchoring itself in the marrow of her bones, not as weight but as light. The bubble shrank below them, fragile and radiant against the storm. The sky creature coiled around it one last time, tendrils glowing as if in embrace. Then clouds closed in, veiling it from sight. Silence filled the cabin. No one spoke for long minutes, the hum of the ship their only anchor. Finally, Solen's voice broke the stillness, quiet but resolute. "They trusted us with their last gift. We carry it now, and we will not let it fade." Nia nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The song was still inside her, alive and unbroken. Whatever lay ahead, the wayfarer was no longer just a vessel of exploration. It was a vessel of memory, a vessel carrying a seed of another world's soul into the endless dark. The wayfarer cut through the remnants of the storm, engines humming steadily against the turbulence. Outside, the stars gleamed, as if welcoming them home, though Nia knew they were far from any world she had ever known. Inside, the crew moved with quiet reverence. Jarrow reviewed the resonance data, eyes soft with wonder. Kesh carefully stored moss and spores, checking each container twice. Alira monitored navigation, the calm precision of her fingers steadying their course. Solen sat in the captain's chair, gaze fixed on the void ahead. Nia stood at the viewport, hand still pressed to the glass. She felt the forest within her, the echo of every song, every pulse, every memory they had carried. It was no longer alien, it was part of her now, woven into the fabric of her being. "Where to next?" Kesh asked, voice hushed. They were leaving a world alive with song, but carrying the weight of its history and possibility. Solen smiled faintly. "Wherever the stars take us. Wherever memory must be kept." Jarrow added softly, "And we will share what we've learned so the song does not fade." Nia nodded, a quiet determination settling over her. They were not conquerors. They were not historians in the usual sense. They were keepers, stewards, guardians of a world that had trusted them. The wayfarer hummed, a gentle vibration in resonance with the memory they carried. Nia pressed her palms together, and she thought she felt the pulse of the forest, steady, patient, endless, as though it was saying goodbye and beginning again in the same moment. Stars stretched before them, infinite and serene. The crew settled into the quiet rhythm of the ship, carrying with them a symphony of another world, memories alive and unbroken. Each knew that the journey ahead would be long and the work of remembrance never-ending. Yet hope burned bright. Somewhere in the darkness, a new seed waited to grow, nurtured by the song they carried. And Nia, heart full, knew that the story of the bubble, the forest, and the sky creature would live again, in them, in the stars, in every note that echoed beyond the silence. The peregrine sailed on, a vessel of exploration, yes, but more than that, a vessel of memory, of song, and of light.